Welcome to Alter. I'm your host, Nicole Meline. This podcast explores the practice of transformation as a conversation between hustle and flow. Altering, changing, growing, becoming, and altering, offering, surrendering, opening to divine conspiracy. It's the dance of the leader, athlete, artist, entrepreneur, committed not just to optimal expression, but to exceptional being. So here are adventures in alignment and conspiracy, awake to all the grit, dirt, and complexity of our world, alert to the graces that come alongside the struggle, the hustle, a cocktail of soul food, new rhythms, and street wisdom, encouragement, an infusion of courage for the moments you need it most. I'm your host, Nicole Meline. Let's alter together. Happy New Year, y'all. Happy 2020. This episode is all about envisioning this new year. It's about creating a map heartward, envisioning your desires, envisioning what your heart demands for this year, and creating soulful architecture toward it. The last episode I released is called Integrate 2019, Your Year in Review. So it's a great preface to this episode. You might want to come back to this one if you haven't listened to that last one, because it's so important to really understand where we're coming from as we think about where we're headed and what needs to change, what needs to shift, what needs to transform. Here we are, 2020. I just released the Envision Planner, which I've been so excited to share with you about. And it's been really amazing to me in the last week or two, especially as the world has started to talk about this new year, 2020, to realize the synchronicity between that name, Envision, which came to me about 6 months ago. And I somehow didn't even make the connection to the fact that this new year, when I hoped to release the planner, was 2020. It was literally about clarity of vision, seeing clearly. We're going to come back to that today. The planner is not dated. You can start it whenever, wherever, however, and that was really intentional. So this episode is inspired by some of the juicy questions that I ask at the beginning of the Envision Planner. You can get it at nicolemeline.com, but this episode is basically going to be a jumping off point, a deep dive from some of those questions some of the many questions that I ask in the planner, as a preface to the ways that you're laying out your days, the soulful architecture that you're creating for yourself. You know, a lot of the conversation this time of year is around hustle. It's hustle conversation, which absolutely has its place. This podcast is about finding a harmony between hustle, muscle, striving, when to push through, and also flow, grace, swerves, the unexpected, the things that we can't control, and how do we dance with those things? How do we know when to crash through the rock, and how do we know when to flow around it, right? So I just want to acknowledge that though, and that was in creating the planner. It was really a project that I was trying to solve for myself, realizing that so much of the way that I thought about how I shape my own life and structure my own goals is coming from this place of hustle. And I want more and more to be skilled in knowing when to flow, in finding joy in the moment and in the unexpected that crashes into my day. So when we are so goal focused, when we are so committed to a vision, that can lead to a life actually of very little joy, in that there's constantly going to be interruptions. There's constantly going to be ways that we're thrown off course, ways that we need to reset and recalibrate. I love this saying, solid goals, flexible means. Solid goals, flexible means. hustle and flow. A trend in recent years around New Year's, which I really love, is this idea of a word for the year, coming up with a banner word for the year. I love that because it's about vision, right? It's about intentionality and really getting clear on what it is that's most important to you. And I can never settle on a single word. I am much more excited about a kind of manifesto statement or an oath, that a sankalpa that we place over each season, maybe more of like a 3-month stretch than a whole entire year. But that said, the single word that I've landed on for this next year for myself is fueled. And I want to unpack that. At this time of year, we also are often thinking about balance, coming back into balance. And that's a word that I'll often hear, as a favorite banner word for the year, balance. I don't believe in balance. I think it's a beautiful concept, but practically speaking, I just don't believe it's possible. I would rather have passion than balance. And there's something about recognizing the seasons of our life and the seasons of elements like parenthood or entrepreneurship or any kind of a startup of anything, whether that's the start of a new form, a new series of habits that you're trying to take on. Actually, balance in those times is pretty impossible. Like a new parent is never going to be able to get 8 hours of sleep, right? That's just not the season that they're in. An entrepreneur is probably not going to be able to have the sort of work life, the work play balance that they might want. But more importantly, in both cases, they're in passion. They're in the flow of passion, right? There's this child that they've fallen radically in love with. There's this work that they've fallen radically in love with, that they've reoriented their life around. And passion, there's something to be said for passion over balance. What I want to think of instead of balance, what I want to keep coming back to, and this connects to my word for the year, is centeredness. This is what I want to invite you into today to try on for this next year. What centers you? So when you're going through the course of a day, or you're going through, the course of a month, and you've got goals in mind, maybe it's something that you're training for, maybe it's a work goal. Of course, there's a ton of swerves that are going to come your way. How do you find your center? When you're pulled into extremes of emotion, or when you're pulled into self-soothing or self-numbing practices, what can re-center you? When it feels like your life is swirling around you, what is it that centers you? Another way of thinking about that is what anchors you? What pulls you home? What pulls you heartward? This word fueled for me is about that. So this year, I want to be plugged in to source. I want to be plugged into spirit constantly. So that's going to manifest itself in my meditation practice. That's going to manifest itself in my movement practice, in the ways that I'm fueling my body. I want to have this perspective on all of it that comes from a place of wanting to remain plugged in to an energy source outside myself, to remember that this does not all depend upon me. I'm so supported. I'm so supported by the energy of the food that I eat. I'm so supported by spirit conspiring with me. I'm so supported by the network, the matrix of friendships and relationships that I'm in. And I want to be plugged in constantly to all of those sources of energy so that I can dream as big as possible. I can dream as wildly as possible, because that dream doesn't just rely on my own resources to come true. That dream, as long as I am plugged into this network of energy, that dream is drawing from all of that. So similarly, when a curveball gets thrown into your life, if you're plugged in to source, however it is that you connect with your matrix of relationships. Side note, I have to throw this out. I just learned this and it's so exciting. Do you know that the word matrix means womb. In Latin, the word matrix is the same word for womb. So this sense of the network that you are plugged into is what is forming you, nurturing you, creating you, literally. Just had to throw that out there. So what are your sources of spiritual power? Get really clear on them. Guard them. Commit to them. Prioritize them. Because as internal work deepens, external work can expand and broaden. The retreats I lead around the world are called altar journeys because they are pilgrimages of transformation and restoration and connection. But the first name for them that I had, the first few that I did under this banner of nomadic belonging. And this phrase came to me and I just fell in love with it because it's another version of being fueled, of being connected, of being plugged in to source. I love this idea of creating a home in yourself, creating a home in myself, in my own heart. If you've been listening closely, that's the theme song of this podcast. I don't know if it'll change or not in this next year. It might actually, because new season, but I do want to take this opportunity to really highlight the song is by the band called The Collection. And I can remember standing on a curb in Brooklyn, hearing it for the first time. It was as I was thinking, conceiving of this whole podcast. And I knew at like gut level, this is it. This is the theme song of this podcast, because I'm hoping to invite you into practices and invite you into insights and ways of building a home in yourself, building a home in your own heart. Someone asked me recently what my definition of prayer is. And I want to ask you the same question. What is your definition of prayer? And the first answer that came to me is building a home in God. Prayer is building a home in God. And no home is without uncertainty, mystery, but it's putting down roots in God. It's constantly returning to and abiding in. So I hope that you're getting a sense of this theme that I'm inviting you into for this next year of connection, of nomadic belonging, this sense of belonging that you're cultivating, this sense of connection to source. How is it that you create that in your life? Or how is it that it finds you? What are the moments where you feel recharged, where you feel connected to something greater than yourself that's supporting you, this matrix of support? How can you guard that this year? Become specific about what are those practices for you. Maybe it's ways of eating, ways of moving, ways of stillness, ways of rest, ways of connection to your community. Get really clear on what those practices are. And as you think about what you're prioritizing this next year, that comes first. Your own connection to source, your own energizing of yourself. Second thing that I want to invite you into at this time of year, as I said a little bit before, there's a lot of language around hustle, right? This time of year. What are your goals? What's your banner for the year? What are you going to accomplish this year? How much money do you want to make? How do you want your career to grow? What are your fitness goals? All of it. And yes, all of that has its place. Absolutely. But the focus in a lot of that is on what we're going to do. What are we going to do with this year? I want to invite you into the question, what do you want to be this year? Who do you want to be this year? One way of thinking about fitness in particular, and of course, we should all ride the wave of this time of year, and it's focused on fitness and wellness. But a revolutionary perspective, a perspective that's just revolutionized my own way of thinking about fitness and coaching, is that when you say want to run a marathon, your greatest passion is not actually about finishing a marathon. What you really want is to become a runner. Your interest in yoga is probably less about hitting a handstand or some kind of amazing arm balance or something, and it's more to become someone who practices yoga. So guess what? Every single day that you make an investment in that practice, you are becoming more and more and more of a runner. You are more deeply becoming a yogi. You are more deeply becoming someone who nourishes himself with respect for your energy resources and respect for the planet. So it's less about to do and more about to be. So especially if you haven't yet really given a lot of thought to the person that you want to become this year, less about, yes, of course, have goals for your finances this year. Have quantifiable goals for your finances, for your fitness, for how much time that you want to spend with your beloved, all of that. But who do you want to be in that? Who do you want to become? Another way of thinking about this would be, what do you want the quality of your presence to be this year? When you walk into a room, how does that room change? What do you bring to that room? What's the fragrance that you bring to anyone that you encounter? I want to be someone who brings possibility, wonder, belief, awe, humor, joy. That's what I want to cultivate in my own heart. And that's what I want to bring to the encounters that I have this next year. I made a playlist last week called The Songs That Changed My Life This Year. They're mostly beautiful, wise, brave poems over club bangers. But there's an arc to it, starting with higher energy and ending with a kind of soul shavasana, lullabies for our restlessness. And one of those big, epic, high-energy songs that I just had on repeat on my run playlist and sweat playlist this year is Mumford & Sons' Slip Away. There's an amazing line that is threaded through it that I had to listen back to a couple of times because I thought, what? This can't be what they say. Come and suffer here. No more questions. Come and suffer here. It's this amazing invitation to come, suffer. You can suffer with me. What? The way that I hear that, the way I'm inspired by that, is to build so much strength, be so plugged in to source, to infinite energy, that I can say that to anyone I choose. Come. Suffer here. I'll take care of you. I'll hold you. I have energy to spare. I have strength to spare. You can come and suffer here. You can be your truest, most authentic, most undone self here. Here's the place for that. There's strength enough for you. There's strength in excess for you.
Find me holding my breath for you. Come and suffer here.
In inviting you to think about who you want to be this year and how you want to be plugged in to community, to source, I want to circle back to this idea of 2020 vision, of envisioning 2020, envisioning with total clarity. Our individual perspectives are limited. My perspective is limited to my own five senses, to my own experience of my past and my present. And a great example of this is that many of us can't necessarily see the things that we do really well, that we do best, because they come with such ease. They're just second nature to us, right? So I hope you've had the experience of someone telling you like, look, you know what, you're especially gifted in this or that. You're really, really good at this or that. And some of those things we can't know for ourselves because we're wrapped in the limitations of our own perspective. What I want to invite you into as your vision casting for this next year is 2020 vision, is inviting as many perspectives on your strengths and where you need to grow as possible. And this is going to be brave action. This is going to be risky action here. I want to encourage you in these first few weeks of the year to have at least one conversation, start with one, with someone really close to you that you trust, that you know is going to talk straight to you, that you know is not going to pull any punches, but is going to give you tough love. Emphasis on the tough and emphasis on the love. And ask them, what am I strongest at? What am I doing well and I need to amplify and focus on and prioritize giving my energy to? What is my zone of genius that I may be neglecting because I'm splitting my attention over this and this and this and this? So first ask that question of, what do I do best? What is my zone of genius? What would you say that is? And secondly, how can I grow? How do I need to grow? And if you want to get really brave, I encourage you to ask 4 or 5 people these same questions and to offer it to them as well. I promise you these conversations might be the most significant that you've ever had with these people, that all of a sudden those friendships, those relationships can go 10 stories deeper the minute that you have this kind of an honest exchange, that you invite them to share the perspectives that maybe out of love for you and value for the friendship, they're not going to risk saying unless it's invited. But that kind of radical knowledge and awareness and vision, 2020 vision, can inform your own vision casting for this next year, can inform your own vision casting for this next year in ways that you can't even imagine. A question that I have for you as you think about who you want to be in your world, as opposed to what you want to do or alongside what you want to do, is how do you want to call up your community? How will you elevate your community this year? When I walk into a room, I want my vibration, my presence, my attention to call anyone I encounter into their highest self. So that when I walk into a room, I elevate the consciousness of that room. I elevate the awareness of that room. People stand up straighter. People believe in their full capacity. People inhabit and embody themselves fully. And even saying those words gives me chills because I understand the weight of it. I understand the grandeur of it, right? The brashness of that kind of a desire. And I'm challenged by it. I'm challenged by, what does that mean for me then? What does that mean for the degree that I'm living in integrity, the degree that I'm plugged into source, the degree that I'm vibrating at the highest possible vibration? So I want to ask you the same thing. What is your vision of you elevating the communities of which you're part? Let's start with your home. That's Ram Dass, who just passed away this last week, and it's been such an amazing thing to be in the flood of the world celebrating him. Ram Dass says, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family, right? So let's start there. Let's start in the grit of it. What would it look like for you to elevate your family this year, for you to call every member of your family into their full potential, for you to love them into their full potential, for you to so encourage and celebrate steps that they take towards that, for you to create safety for them to be authentically themselves, and for you to call them up? What would that look like? Maybe it would look like articulating to your family what you see in them in a way that's not about, oh, these are all the things that you're not, and this is what I wish you were, but more, I believe in you. I see everything that you can be, and I'm going to just keep on holding space for it and celebrate who you are along the way, right? So what would that look like for you to elevate your family? What would it look like for you to elevate your friendships? What kind of intentionality would that look like? Maybe that's regular texts, emails, cards. Nothing better than receiving an unexpected card in the mail, right? That someone's actually handwritten, where you just describe a vision of them in their fullness. You celebrate the fullness of who they are. You celebrate their becoming. What would it look like in your work relationships for you to be someone who's constantly creating team, believing in the power and the possibility of team, celebrating the strengths of your teammates, trying to create synergy, to create enthusiasm for the experience of working together? What would that look like? What would it look like for you to raise the vibration of every encounter that you have this year? The Envision Planner begins with space for envisioning 16 different categories of your life, 16 different elements and aspects of it. And of those, I want to share a few with you today and ask some questions surrounding them. The planner is a deep dive into these categories, but I want to just throw out a few of these questions for you as you envision this next year. So the first is the category of nourishment, which very much connects to this idea of fueling ourselves, of connecting ourselves to source. So I want to ask in a really broad way, what is your vision for nourishing yourself this year? So sure, this time of year, we might start to think really specifically about different diet protocols, right? Trying vegan, trying paleo, just cleaning up our diet in different ways and maybe being really specific about certain foods that we're eliminating. But I want to take a step back from that and think more broadly about nourishment. How will you nourish yourself this year? What's your vision for nourishing yourself? How do you want to eat for the good of your body and the planet? How will you fuel your creative energy and your strength? With what practices will you nourish your body aside from food? What soul food nourishes your creativity? Another big category is work. So my first question for you in 2020 is, how do you define satisfying and successful work? How do you define satisfying and successful work? What quality of presence will you practice in your work? Is work this separate element of your life that some part of you shuts down in? Is work a kind of drudgery that you do so that you can live the way that you want to? What kind of presence, what kind of full body presence do you want to bring to your work? What joy will you bring to your work this year? What is a vision of you working with joy include? What is your vision of work that challenges and expands you and enriches the community of collaborators and clients of which you're part? So let's remember that. Work is about challenging and expanding us, right? Work is about actually learning, growing, being stretched in a way that is exciting and enjoyable. What is your vision of that this year? Another category of our lives we've been exploring, especially in the last couple episodes of December on ritual and ceremony, is celebrations and ceremonies. My friends, we need to be intentional about this stuff. What kinds of celebrations and ceremonies do you want to initiate or observe or take part in this year? I'm going to ask that really broadly. That could be anything from a kind of spiritual gathering that you want to be a part of or you want to create. What kinds of gatherings do you want to be a part of this year? What kinds of dinner parties do you want to go to? What kind of dance parties do you want to go to? By the way, do you know you can just start these things? You can throw the parties that you want to attend. You can throw the gatherings that you want to attend. What do they look like for you this year? Are there friends in your life that have milestone birthdays this year or have gone through a really tough time and need some kind of a weird, funky celebration, some kind of ceremony to move through? Is there a group of friends in your life that you'd like to go on some adventure with, some kind of a celebration with? Is there a family member that you want to connect with in a really significant way? Is there a kid in your life who's coming up to that transition point of needing some kind of a rite of passage? And could you prepare some kind of a rite of passage for them? That could just be a letter. That could be something that you give to them, but maybe it's also something that you create for them. What kinds of celebrations and ceremonies and rituals do you want to take part in? How will you party and how will you pray? And last big question, what adventures do you want to go on this year? Where do you want to explore? How do you want to get lost? Please get lost this year. Please get out into wilderness this year in some form or another. Maybe that is a recognizable wilderness or just some place that you go that is strange, that is wild, that opens you up, where you feel like there's no rules, there's no certain way that you have to behave. You can rediscover yourself. You can open up in new and fresh ways and explore new ways of being. You can see new things. You can see new animals. You can see new scenes. You can expand your vision, and in that, give yourself the possibility of fresh views on your life, on your future, on your possibilities. Where do you want to go? In the playlist I made last week, the songs that changed my life this year, a couple of the last songs on that playlist came to me like love letters from the future. Leif Vollebeck's song, Wait a While, and Fink's song, My Love's Already There. So just to go first, just to spread the welcome mat of vulnerability to you, I'm calling in love this year. That's one of the adventures that I want to go on. And not for the first time, but with an even more open, hopeful heart, with radical, costly faith and timing, in holy waiting. Radical faith that what I seek, who I seek, is seeking me. I'm also calling in collaborators this year. I'm calling in assistance in building altar movement practice, altar journeys. I'm calling in collaborators who are passionate about supporting others to envision and build the dreams their hearts demand. It's a weird thing to hold space for something I can't control. We can't hustle our way into love. We can create joy over and over again to create increasing faith in the future, regardless of how it unfolds, regardless of the version of romantic love or success or wealth we envision. I'm recording this episode in Argentina on an adventure that's just one of many surprise parties God likes to throw to show that she is listening. More on this soon. So I've been reading Borges, the Argentine poet who writes, "So plant your own gardens and decorate your own soul instead of waiting for someone to bring you flowers. Why am I sharing this? Because when you start to speak your dream, you invest more of yourself into it. In fact, you don't just invest yourself into it, you call on the resources of whoever it is that you are speaking it to invest into it with you. If you want to run a huge race this year, if you want to build your business beyond all expectations this year, if you want to become a version of yourself that's going to take major shifts and major changes in your behavior, in your practices, all of it, start speaking it out loud, first to yourself. Even more powerful to speak it in the past tense as though it's already happened. I called in love this year. I opened to love this year. I built my business to this year. I became this year. Start speaking those things first to yourself in the at least present tense, maybe even most powerfully in the past tense, over and over again, practicing that reality, but also speak it to your people. Speak it to the people closest to you so that they can get on your team. They can start to hold you accountable. They can encourage you in that change. Change is hard. Opening up to new things and believing in big horizons is hard. There's so much energy, there's so much inertia that pushes against it. There's so much habit that pulls us against it. So you need the force of not just your own heart and will, but of your entire community cheering you on in this new path. So what are you calling in this year? What are you opening to this year? Speak it, share it. Actually, I would love if you would share it at me at Nicole Meline on social media. I would love if you would share it with your community, maybe tag me, maybe tag the podcast so I can see you're sharing not just with me, but you're calling in your community into this new path that you're carving out for yourself. Will you join me also in experimenting with showing up authentically? From a belief in not just sufficiency, that we are enough, but that others want to come along with us on the journey of our becoming. So when we show up authentically, by which I mean imperfectly, not polished, not complete, not fully arrived, when we show up authentically in who we are in this moment, we give others the gift of coming along on the journey with us, of not only showing up once we've arrived, but of coming along on the journey with us. That's what we all want, is to walk each other home, right? So the two other things that I am experimenting with this next year, as I said earlier, is plugging into source. What does that look like for you? What is the source of your energy, of your joy? What are the sources of your energy and joy? How can you guard them? How can you prioritize them? What would it look like for you to stay connected to that throughout the course of your day? And then lastly, will you experiment with me in adventure this year? In welcoming the unknown, in welcoming the wilderness, so that the unknown, the uncertain doesn't throw us off. It actually excites us. The Alter Journey retreats that I lead are all about soulful adventure. They're absolutely occasions to open yourself up to the unknown, to new horizons, to new views, to fresh vision all over the world. There's a few coming up in Tulum, Mexico, one of the most magical places in the world. Full, complete restoration retreat. Another in Palm Springs in March, and then another in Montana in late May and early June. And stay tuned for more as the road unfolds. I heard this song Himalayas by Scott Mullaville this last month in one of my favorite rituals, a nighttime altar movement practice, a no rules dance party, and had instant chills and that sense of every horizon expanding, of shifting into possibility.
I wanna go where I never
If these questions are sparking all kinds of new thoughts in you, and if you are looking for a way to efficiently envision your day in light of your greater dreams and goals and priorities, I want to invite you to check out the Envision Planner that I just launched this last month. It's at NicoleMeline.com. It's designed to help all of us hustle drenched in gratitude, to practice more attention, eventually razor sharp attention to spirit, grace, flow, and the gifts of our lives as we create the dreams our hearts are demanding. It's been so fun to watch these planners go out into the world and start to spark all kinds of new dreams and new directions, and to hear people start to share those. So in joining this community around the planner, you're also joining a community of dream chasers and goal diggers and grace attenders. My friends, I wish you courage as you dream wildly into this new year. I wish you strange, new, open roads, creative work you can't get enough of, and love coming for you around the bend with a vengeance. Happy New Year, y'all. I'm holding space for all that will become in it as we alter together.
I am ready to trade it all. I wanna go where I've never been. Gotta know what I've been missing. I wanna come back different.
Finally, a request right from my heart. If you're resonating with this podcast, please rate and leave a review for it in iTunes. It takes less than 15 seconds. You can also subscribe to it in iTunes so you don't miss an episode or the accompanying guided meditations that drop just a few days later. I read each one of your reviews. I learn from them as I think about topics and subjects and questions to ask, to answer, to engage with you with. These reviews mean the world. And here's the magic. They actually help all of us find our people. They raise the podcast visibility in searches, which ultimately connects us all to friends we haven't met yet. And I'm going to be giving some Envision planners and Integrate journals away to be entered in a drawing for this giveaway. Rate and review the podcast on iTunes and share it on social media, tagging at Nicole Meline and at Alter Together. And DM me a screenshot of the review, because this is only worth doing if it is a real conversation, gritty, brave, vulnerable, risking that vulnerability, risking getting it wrong. I'd love to hear what kind of hope and vision and play it's stirring in you. You can connect with me at NicoleMeline.com or on social media at Nicole Meline, or via the Alter Together community on altertogether.com, where you can also find notes and the playlist for this episode. Let's proceed as though all of it is sacred as we alter together.